I will call to order the Building and Zoning Committee meeting. It is now 8:13 p.m. and we'll start on item number one, the zoning hearing board agenda for May 11th, 2026. There's one appeal for our consideration, appeal number 26-3812, Ram Food Corp. for 230 Southeastern Road, better known as the Glenside Dunkin' Donuts, right? I don't know if we have staff who wants to tee this up, but if not, I'm not seeing anyone volunteer. So if not, I will turn it over to the applicant's counsel, Ms. Farrell, for a very brief presentation, and then open it up for questions and comments from the board. Ms. Farrell?
Great. Good evening, everybody, and well done on the Cedar Road four-way intersection, by the way. Putting my resident hat on for a second. I'm
There you
excited to
go.
hear about that as well. Um, I'm going to try to keep this brief, but I will apologize in advance that this is a fairly dense little redevelopment and there's a lot going on. So I do want to make sure that we kind of hit all the topics. It looks on paper like there's a lot of zoning relief required. And so I just want to make sure that we've covered everything. I do also have with me this evening our team. So we have Keith Heigl, who's the civil engineer, Girish Patel, who's the property owner and operator of the Dunkin' Donuts, has been for a very long time, and Lenny Homan, who's the sort of project manager for the project. And as we go through it or at the end, if there are any other specific questions, they certainly can answer those for you. If I'm able to share my screen, I can do so and walk everybody through.
Andrew Elliott, could we do that?
Absolutely. Okay, perfect. Thank you. Excuse me. So again, as was indicated, this is the Dunkin' Donuts on South Easton Road that certainly I think we're all very familiar with. The application that's before you or that is coming before the zoning hearing board next week has to do with the redevelopment of this site. I think it's also important to note just at the outset, we first reached out to the township almost 2 years ago in connection with the concept for this redevelopment. And we've met with township consultants several times in the interim and have evolved the plan in response to a lot of those comments and questions. Additionally, at the request of Commissioner Ehrman, since this is his ward, we have had 3 separate community meetings at the site. We had 2 in August of last year and 1 just a couple of weeks ago to present the proposal to the near neighbors and to seek their feedback. Those discussions, both the township staff and consultant discussions, as well as the community feedback, did result in plan adjustments along the way. So this plan that you see before you is really reflective of those conversations and the kind of consideration that we were getting as we moved along through this process. We did also appear before the Planning Commission a week ago, and we received their unanimous recommendation for approval of the zoning relief. So I'm happy to check that box as well. So I think as everybody's generally familiar, this is the existing Dunkin' Donuts. It's sort of immediately adjacent between the new Wawa at Waverly and Southeastern and the Easton Beer a little further along Southeastern Road. This corridor, this particular area along Easton Road here is entirely commercial in nature and for the most part really is largely vehicle focused. As you can see, though, the properties along here do abut residential properties to the rear, the Dunkin' as well as the others. The property is in the MU1 mixed use district, and it's also in the Glenside Commercial Enhancement District. In its present condition, as you can see here, particularly on the left-hand side here of this slide, this property is improved with an approximately 3,255 square foot Dunkin' Donuts that until very recently also housed a Baskin Robbins. The property, as it's presently developed, exceeds the allowable impervious coverage limits for a property in this district. There's an 85% maximum allowed, and this property is north of 87% impervious, with the exception of a very tiny buffer area along the Wawa property and some buffering to the rear. This is almost entirely an impervious site, and there's very little green or landscaping on the site in its present condition. There are currently 32 on-site vehicle parking spaces, so 32 car spots on site. And I would note 14 of those, as you can see on this slide, along the rear of the property that really face into those residential properties to the rear. There are additionally 3 on-street parking spaces that are striped along the frontage here. In conversation with the township staff in particular and consultants as this plan evolved, we were asked to eliminate those 3. 2 of them would have been in conflict with the new driveway locations. So we talked about relocating them elsewhere along the frontage there, but staff felt strongly that they wanted to reduce traffic conflicts in this immediate area. So those will be coming out. Presently, and this does become a little bit important in a minute because we're flipping it around, but presently folks enter along the southern, we'll call it sort of the southern driveway here adjacent to the Easton Beer, circulate through the site and exit out of the site in very close proximity, as you can see, to that existing Wawa driveway there. Although you can't tell in this aerial image, the site is also within the floodplain. That's because of an underground culvert that runs through this portion of the property. There's an access point in the rear here, and that culvert is running really through the residential properties all the way under this parking lot and out, tying in on Easton Road. So that's an existing condition on the site that we do have to work around as part of the redevelopment. So again, I think as you can see in these images, the other thing I would take away from all of this is that the existing curb cuts, as you can see, really are largely uncurbed. They're pretty unregulated when it comes to what you would expect to see these days in terms of sort of structured, organized access and exit with sort of clean curbing along driveways. There's also really very little landscaping of any sort along this frontage. There's some immediately in front of the building, but otherwise really not a lot of green at all in the immediate area along the frontages here. So again, you can see again, this is the existing conditions survey, gives you a better idea of really the only area presently that has any green, again, as I said, is this little strip along the Wawa and then a couple of spots kind of in the rear. You can see this sort of funky property line at the rear here. This is that area I was talking about where that culvert kind of comes through. This also becomes important for the redevelopment because the township has asked us to maintain an access point here. Presently, obviously, there's parked cars sometimes in front of this when the township's trying to access it. So we've worked with the township to make sure that there's no permanent improvements along this area here. So they'll be able to access that underground culvert as they need to and when they need to. So moving on then to the redevelopment itself. The Dunkin' corporate periodically requires its franchisees to update and modernize their properties. And so as you can imagine, particularly, of course, relative to some of these older properties, especially, they're also always looking to add a drive-through if and where they can. So this proposal really is multifaceted, and I'm sort of showing you this just in the context of the overall existing conditions, so you can see kind of how this sits overall in the land, but we'll scroll in a bit here just to make it a little easier to see what's going on. So the overall proposal is for the complete demolition of the existing 3,255 square foot Dunkin' structure and construction of a smaller 2,295 square foot building that will house a Dunkin' Donuts with an accessory drive-through, as well as a walk-up only or walk-in only Jimmy John's sandwich shop. So you will not be able to order from the drive-through for the Jimmy John's. The drive-through is exclusive to the Dunkin'. So this is a similar configuration in terms of shared space as what was previously there relative to the Baskin and Robbins. Those ice cream locations have largely closed generally in all of the Dunkin' locations. And the Jimmy John's is a nice sort of, we think, counterpart to the Dunkin' operation to house as a sort of co-occupant of this space. The plan will continue to maintain approximately 16 indoor seats, which matches the existing indoor dining area. That was of particular request of the community. This is a pretty heavily utilized community site. Every time we were there for any kind of a community presentation, there were lots of folks that were just sort of meeting, having their coffee and, late afternoon or evening. So it was really important to the community that we maintain that indoor seating area, and Duncan is certainly happy to do that. We've also, by reconfiguring the building and pulling it back slightly from the street, we're able to carve out some outdoor dining area along the street frontage to help kind of soften the pedestrian feel along that frontage. This also results in a reduction in impervious surfaces on the site from the presently, as I said, non-compliant 87% to a code compliant 73%. So we're reducing impervious on site by about 14%, which is a pretty significant reduction in overall impervious. And as you can see, that really allows us to green up quite a bit of this site. So everything that you see on the left side here, kind of adjacent to Easton Beer, that's all new green area that will be buffered and landscaped. We also are able to carve out additional green area along the property frontage immediately adjacent to the Wawa. And then in the rear here, we were initially showing a couple of additional parking spaces back here. In working with the township, they asked us to kind of reconsider that and reconfigure it so we could pick up some additional green along the rear as well. So we're doing that as well. We'll also, just sort of while we're focused on the rear here, there is a pretty mature row of arborvitae along this rear property line. We're also proposing an 8-foot full solid fence along that rear there, again, at the request of the residents. That'll just help sort of increase that, that buffer along that rear. We're also, as you can see, removing all of the parking that was previously facing into those rear residences there. So all of the parking now shifts to the sides of the building, none along that rear. It does also, as a result, then we're reducing the on-site parking from what's presently 32 spaces down to 20 on-site spaces. And as I said, we did have a couple of spots in there over that 20 that the township asked us to take out, and we've done that. These 3 spots down here we talked about, those also come out in the on-street condition. With respect to and actually, let me switch. Here we go. It's probably a little easier to see some of the drive-through components here. So one of the things that we do, that we have to do as a result of the introduction of the drive-through, and which actually creates a pretty positive net benefit in the plan, is we essentially flip the circulation. So if you remember, present condition, folks would enter through this sort of, we'll say the left driveway, circulate around, and exit out the right driveway close to that Wawa driveway that went in. Here, because we need to orient, obviously, the drivers and the vehicles so that they're on the correct side when they pull up to the drive-through order point, we're flipping that. So customers will all enter now in the driveway closer to the Wawa. They'll circulate through. They can either enter into the drive-through lane, and this is all just striped along here, so it's not a curb, but it's striping to delineate the drive-through. So they can either enter into the drive-through, pull into parking, circulate around into the other parking, and then everybody leaves out of the driveway closer to the Easton Beer location. The other thing that we're able to do, because we've reduced the size of this building and we have a sort of much longer, skinnier footprint, is to bring both of these driveways much closer in on the property. So they both come quite a bit off of the property lines. So if you can remember, this is the present condition at the Wawa driveway. So we're almost right at that property line. In the proposed condition, you can see we're adding, this driveway ends up about 15 feet or so further away from that Wawa driveway than it is presently. Even more dynamic, I think, or more pronounced on the Easton Road side, where we have this kind of uncontrolled depressed curb here that comes all the way out along that entire frontage. in this condition, once completed, obviously curbed, controlled driveway exit, and a lot of green along that frontage there. The other thing that this does, as you can see on here, is we do add new curbing along the frontage and along those driveways. So we're really channeling those access points in a way that they're not presently controlled. We also spent a fair amount of time with the neighbors on the location of the trash and recycling enclosure. I know some of the commissioners have been privy to many, many conversations about trash pickup and deliveries in and along Easton Road here. You can see in the upper right corner here, this is the Wawa trash enclosure. The neighbors were, really adamant in our conversations with them. They wanted us to try to get this, sort of ours as far away as we could from that rear property line and still be able to circulate safely. So for example, originally we had looked at, did it make sense to put it up in this back corner here? The neighbors asked us really to, take a harder look at that and see if we could find another location. So the trash and recycling enclosure is immediately, it's sort of tucked in here immediately adjacent to the building. That allows for ease of access for that trash truck, but pulls it well away from the adjoining properties. And again, I think that was a feature that when we met with the residents, both last fall and then again last week, they were really happy to see that as a solution to that problem, which has been a problem for them for quite a while. I would also note there is a condition in the existing zoning decision related to this development that limits the hours for deliveries from 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. We are anticipating that the zoning board will impose a similar condition relative to any relief here. We don't have any objection to that. Garish and his team have been working within those time periods for quite some time. We also talked to the neighbors about the trash and recycling falling within those same hours, and again, have no objection to that. That doesn't presently exist in the condition as it was previously adopted, but certainly if the zoning board were inclined to impose that same condition here relative to trash and recycling, that would not be a problem. The last aspect of the relief that's needed here has to do with the building signage. It's a fairly a simple, I think, straightforward, pretty modest signage package. But because of the configuration of the building, it does require a bit of relief. So the proposal is for a Dunkin' and Jimmy John's collectively, it's about 57 square feet on the front of the building, so facing Easton Road, with the same Jimmy John's and Dunkin' signage treatment on the entrance elevation, which is that elevation that faces the Wawa. And then on the side that faces into the parking lot to the Easton Beer, Dunkin' has a cool new little feature where they add to the side of the building that, so in this case, it would say Glenside runs on Dunkin', not Reading, but that gives you a sense of kind of what that looks like. So just a nice feature along that drive-through side of the building, just to help break it up a little, put a little bit of architectural interest along there. And get the Glenside name out there as well. The existing pylon sign will be updated and replaced with a new sign that certainly allows us to control the lighting a little bit better than some of these older signs. So overall, an improvement in terms of the internal illumination there. There's a few small directional signs to help folks get their bearings and understand coming and going. We think those are particularly important here, given the location of the drive-through and that we're changing the circulation patterns, of course. And then what you would expect typically relative to the drive-through itself, just an order point, little canopy with an order here logo, a menu board as you're used to seeing. And again, that menu board is sort of set back into this green area here. And then a drive-through canopy to indicate, where that drive-through point really starts. So I know I ran through a lot of that fairly quickly. I wanted to respect Commissioner Ehrman's request that I do that as quickly as possible. Certainly happy to run through any of it in more detail. As I said, there's a fair amount of zoning relief that goes along with this because of its location in the MU1. as well as its location in the enhancement district, and then some of the signage that goes along with that. And that little quirk relative to the floodplain that we're technically in, even though it's actually all contained in the culvert underneath us.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Farrell.
Mhm.
Great presentation. I will open it up to questions, but just a couple of comments from me first. So uh, I'm really excited. I think that the project um, it not only is good for Duncan, for Mr. Patel's business, but also for the community. I like that it has number one, improvement on green space. I like that it has the sort of branding of Glenside. I think that's a really nice addition to the neighborhood. And I think that the fact that it continues to offer the community space, which is critically important. I know that the footprint is shrinking, but the fact that you're utilizing space in a way that allows for the same amount of seating inside is just really important. We have folks who spend every morning or every afternoon in this Dunkin' Donuts. Same faces, same banter and jokes and such, and it is just really a really important piece of the community. So I'm glad to see that. I'm also glad to see the work that's going into the back fencing. That has always been an important issue to ensure that Duncan remains a good neighbor to the residents behind it. And uh, I think I understood you, Ms. Farrell, to say that the fencing is going to be improved so that it is sort of impervious to I think you called it back fencing, but I couldn't remember if there was some other um, description because
Yeah,
obviously with cars coming through, we want to ensure that the headlights aren't going into the neighbors' backyards and that sort of thing.
yep. So presently, along that rear property line, there's again some pretty dense arborvitae. There's some holes in that probably, need to get
Right.
filled in. And then there's a piece of fence. It doesn't run the whole way,
Right.
and it's a little it's not entirely opaque. We will be running a solid fence along this rear line here. And then I should have mentioned, but didn't, and I think you all know, we'll be back for land development, right? This is a full land development. So
Sure.
we're anticipating as part of that, certainly in connection with shade tree conversations, as we develop out the landscaping along here, whatever needs to be sort of filled in the rear there will also happen in connection with the rest of these improvements. The one area that won't be as densely landscaped as the other along this fence line is the area that the township's asking for in terms of the gate access, right? So there will be a gate along there. Again, solid fence. It's going to look just like the rest of the fence. But it will have gate access for the township there.
Excellent. Also speaking to the condition about deliveries, which I'm certainly familiar with, the commitment from Duncan to add to that condition trash pickup during those hours. If that's something you're committed to doing, I think that'd go a really long way to um, help us, be as supportive as possible in this process. So I
Yep,
thought I heard you say that, but just wanted to confirm.
we did. Yep, and I did confirm that again today with Lenny and Garish. They've spent quite a bit of time over the last few years working with both their delivery team and the commercial haulers to
Yep.
to get everybody working within those hours, and they've got a good team in place that's doing all that. So extending that to trash and recycling is not a problem.
And I can attest that when there ever had been a problem, right? Because I would hear about it, reaching out to Mr. Holman or Mr. Patel directly was always very easy, and they were always very responsive. So that is certainly appreciated. But I do think it'll be helpful to have that as a condition. I appreciate that commitment. I was going to talk about parking, but I think Commissioner Stein is going to talk about that. So I'll leave that to her. Um, I think this is probably land development, but just so I understand is there going to be any changes to the overhead lighting and how that could potentially bleed into the surrounding properties?
Yep. So as part of the redevelopment of the parking area, then all of that lighting obviously will have to be redone. Existing locations aren't going to work
Right.
for safety and those types of things. So that will all get adjusted as part of that. And you have a much more robust lighting plan requirement than certainly was in place, I think, when this was initially developed. So they'll have to show, we'll show during land development. You've got the night sky and the shields and everything has to point down and not out, and there's no bleed. The LED lighting is much easier to control in that respect. So I think you'll see a much better overall lighting package for the site.
Excellent. And then my last question has to do with um, the drive-through ordering space itself.
Mhm.
So obviously that menu and signage is going to be backlit. Um, how bright is that? And presumably that wouldn't I assume that wouldn't be any more brighter than headlights, which would be blocked by the opaque fencing.
Right.
Um,
So it's all low, similar height to what
mhm,
you would expect from vehicles, right? And those are all those menu boards now everywhere are LED rather
okay.
than incandescent. And again, it really allows you to tamp down the lighting levels. You don't need a lot of light in order to make it really readily visible and readable. So I think between the technology both on the lighting end and on the ordering point end is so drastically different than it used to be that you really, generally speaking, you cannot hear and you cannot see at the property lines any of what it used to be that we literally called it a squawk box, right? Like you could
Right.
hear it from forever away, somebody asking for your order. That whole exchange and the lighting that goes along with it is just much, much softer and less obtrusive than it used to be.
You anticipated my next question, which was the squawk box question. So what is I mean, is there some sort of standard or decibel level that is applied to these ordering locations that or is it just
I believe so. Len is on, and
Yeah.
he's
okay?
much more he's much better versed in that than I am. He can probably answer that question for us.
Mr. Holman, welcome.
Hi, Matt. Thank you. Welcome, everyone. Yeah. So, Matt, regarding that with the new speaker system, the decibel level at that is about just slightly higher. I think it's about 70 decibels, which is just slightly louder than a normal conversation, which is about 60 to 65 decibels. And for every so many feet you move away, that it decreases. The other thing with the new menu boards is it has an automatic volume control, which actually reduces it by about 20 decibel levels. So in the evening, you can set that for even a lower level automatically, and it significantly reduces the decibel levels. And so from a bleed perspective, but by the time you get to about 40, 50 feet away from the speaker system, you won't even hear the noise. So
Great.
it's much better than the old system. And as far as the lighting goes, again, as Amy said, it's all LED lighting. The new car lights have such strong headlights. You're blinding compared to what you're not going to see this. It's really just for the customer when you're ordering, you'll see it, and then there's really no other bleeding of the light.
Fair enough. Thank you for that explanation.
Sure, thank you.
I'm certainly satisfied. Thank you, Mr. Holman. Thank you, Ms. Farrell. I'm going to turn it over to my colleagues. Commissioner Norris, I saw your hand first.
Thank you, Commissioner. Ms. Farrell, a very helpful presentation, very informative. And I was happy to hear about the much improved landscaping. So I just had one question on the landscaping. If I'm not mistaken, currently, I think you showed that there are two what looked like fairly mature trees out front. And I was wondering if those will be maintained or replaced.
That's actually a good question. So I think, and Keith is on, he may have a better answer to this than I do, but I believe at least this one tree should be maintained because it's not, I don't think we're getting anywhere close to it with the driveways. I think one of the trees we weren't sure yet, and until we really do kind of the the full land development and we can figure out where the, the root system for that one tree is, depending on where that driveway lands and the curb cuts, we might lose one of those trees along the frontage, but we are planting. You can see here, there's another tree proposed here. And then we have the opportunity for some landscaping in that one as well. And this could, again, as part of land development, this could turn into 2 trees along the front there. We're just not quite sure yet. But we've got a lot of room to work with for landscaping that doesn't presently exist.
Yeah, I would ask or encourage that that you do as the best you can for maintaining or increasing the trees along the street there, because as much as the shrubbery between the properties is helpful, it definitely to me sends a different picture of our township if you have trees along the main thoroughfare.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, thank you.
Yep.
Great points. Thank you, Commissioner Norris. Commissioner Stein.
Commissioner Norris asked my first question right away. It was about those trees in the front. So I'm glad to hear at least one of them is staying. If you said this and I missed it, I apologize, but were the hours of the drive-through?
I did not, but Lenny, I think, has
Sure.
the details on the operation hours for
Yeah.
the drive-through.
There'll be no there'll be whatever the business hours are. So if it's 4 to 10 o'clock at night or whatever, or 5, it'll be the same hours for the Dunkin' that the building is open.
Okay. And then I was happy to hear that you're willing to commit to the hours that you're using for deliveries now for trash pickup. That was one of the things I was going to ask about. And the fencing in the back, I understand what you're saying about the decibel levels and your equipment or the equipment that you're expecting Dunkin' to use, but this is going to, once it's a drive-through forever, whether it's Dunkin' or not. So would you be willing to have something in the agreement from the zoning hearing board about the solid quality of that fence in the back for the purpose of limiting sound transfer in addition to the light, or the decibel levels, or some sort of commitment in there to make sure that it stays with the property?
I don't think we have any objection to a condition that fence has to be a solid fence.
Okay.
And I think that's absolutely fine. I would be a little nervous about trying to tie decibel levels to the fence.
Right.
But I think certainly saying that fence has to be a solid fence, we don't have any objection to that. And that would then run with the land, even if Duncan left.
Great. Okay. And then my only other question is about the parking. I know I listened in on the planning commission and this came up there as well. It still seems like a lot of parking. I know you've got some seats inside, but presumably the reason that the drive-through is going in is because Duncan feels that most people are going to want to use the drive-through. You're allowed 8 based on the square feet. I'm pretty sure we can all agree 8 is not enough in a situation like this. But I think the max is 120% of 8 is still less than 10. So I guess I'd like to see it capped at twice the max, which would take out 2 more, allow a little bit more green space either along the back or along the front. It just feels like a lot to me.
So and again, I'm going to ask Len to speak to this in a minute
Sure.
as well, because I think he's he's the most versed in terms of the needs of this kind of a facility. I went through a whole host of aerial photographs, sort of historically, even just on Google Earth, and in every single one of those, there were 15 to 18 cars parked in that parking lot. So I think that trying to find the balance between reducing the parking as much as is practical, not creating a parking problem for our neighbors, right? Because we're taking a couple of those spots out along the street frontages there. We don't want to create a parking situation for other businesses in the area if we can accommodate it on site. And in a situation like this, where we're going from a present condition of 32 down to 20, pretty significant reduction in the overall parking on site. And I think that there's real concern from Len and Grish just based on their operational knowledge of the site on going below that. So I'm going to ask Len to just speak to that a little bit more.
Sure, Amy. And just to build on that, and also build on what Matt had indicated about this, this is a neighborhood store. Even Dunkin' Donuts has been in the neighborhood now for what's it, 25 or so years. It's been a multi-brand for most of those years. And Matt, very familiar with the store. So I'm sure as most folks here on this presentation are. But there's folks who come to this store daily. They sit there for hours and hours and hours, enjoying each other, having their coffee, and they're taking up parking spots for hours on end. The other thing with the addition of the Jimmy John's that'll open later in the day, the hours of the Jimmy John's will not be the same as the Dunkin'. That will not open until say 10 or 11 in the morning. With the Jimmy John's not having access to the drive-through, those patrons have to come in and parking is required. And not only with that, we also have our delivery partners, your Grubhub, your DoorDash, they require parking as well, because a lot of the Jimmy John's and even Dunkin' business today, people are using third-party delivery, and those folks require parking as well. And then you have your employees as well. And as Amy said, we're reducing it by 12. So really, we do believe that, reducing the parking along the rear of the property helps out with the neighbors, which was, pulling cars away from that. But having the 20 parking spots is really significant to having the right amount of seating, what the patrons require in this store. We feel that reducing it by 12 is, appropriate.
Commissioner Stein, any other comments there?
No, I think I just still have my same feeling on it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
because I think mostly because you're looking at aerial views now, but those aren't, yes, some people do go and sit there. I've been one of those people who's been there well over an hour before. But most of the traffic is people coming in and out who are presumably going to utilize the drive-through, which I think is the purpose of getting a variance to make this a drive-through. So,
Well, again, I think to Len's point, if this were just the Dunkin' and the Dunkin' drive-through, I think perhaps there's more of an argument to be made for that. But when you add the Jimmy John's, which is walk-in only, and you factor in, I mean, I have a teenager. DoorDash is, he lives and dies by DoorDash. So when you factor in those third-party deliveries now, it really is creating a more significant parking need at a lot of these kind of fast casual locations that maybe we didn't see historically. And there has to be a fair amount of parking available for that kind of turnover. Otherwise, the worry is that you really do start creating a parking situation on the street because they're just going to pull up. They're not going to go looking for parking. They're going to park in front of the store where they're not supposed to be parking and coming in and out. I think this allows us to keep our parking needs, our parking demands on the site while still, significantly increasing the green area over what was there previously. And we did, and I think I mentioned this earlier, but we did take out, I think we had an additional 2 or 3 spots shown initially.
Right.
That we did take out at the township's request. So we have kind of pared this down to what we feel like is the most reasonable, practical to be able to operate safely.
So thank you for that explanation. Commissioner Stein, I'm going to comment on this, but before I do, I wasn't sure if you had anything else you wanted to add.
no, I think you go ahead.
Okay, so I look, I'm supportive, but I tend to agree with Commissioner Stein that the parking looks to me like it could be reduced and accommodate what is needed at the site. I am particularly concerned with the first parking spot on the right-hand side when you come in. Yeah, right there. I think there's the potential for, certainly one car of traffic, but potentially 2 right there, and people coming right into the spot, whether they're making a right in or a left in, and giving a little more leeway in that space, in that ingress before you hit a parking spot where someone's going to necessarily be backing out of there. I think makes a lot of sense to perhaps get rid of that one. You have then a handicap spot and then another handicap spot. So it seems to me that that's certainly a viable area to sort of reduce a spot. And similarly on the other side, I think you're going to have people coming past the queue for pickup, and I think though and someone trying to back out of there, I think it's going to be very difficult. So I think
here, is that what you're talking
yeah.
about? Okay.
So I think those are the two prime parking spots to remove if we're going to do that. And to be honest, with 16 seats inside and 18 spots, I think the numbers sort of make sense. The other thing is, as Commissioner Stein said, a lot of the people who come in and aren't, staying for an hour, the reason they park is because you didn't have a drive-through before, but now you have a drive-through. So I think you're going to see those 5 and 10-minute parkers dissipate significantly with the inclusion of the drive-through. So I think the impact will be negligible or a net positive in terms of the flow and the parking or the need for parking. And then lastly, I'll say there is street parking, even though we're getting rid of those 3 right in front of the store, in front of the Easton Beer and the dental office. There, I think that's a dental office, whatever that is, Santilli's. There is street parking. There's at least 2 or 3 spots there, and so I think if there needs to be an overflow, it could be accommodated. And I think with that reduction, I think from what I'm hearing, I would make a motion to write a letter in support of the application, so that we can make sure that the zoning hearing board, as opposed to no action, so the zoning hearing board fully understands the commitment that Duncan has not only to the neighborhood, but that this board has to Duncan and Jimmy John's. Okay, with that, are there any other comments from the board? Commissioner Shermy Walls.
I just wanted to weigh in that I agree that with the reduction based on both of your very eloquently stated arguments, with the reduction in the parking, I would also, sign on to the letter on behalf of the commissioners. I think it's excellent. And Ms. Farrell, I think the greening of the space is such a marked improvement. I'm really pleased to see. And I'm happy with Jimmy John's too. I'm a Jimmy John's fan.
Yeah. All right. Before we come back to Ms. Farrell and the applicant, let me see if there's any comments from anyone in the public. I see a couple of residents on here, including a Ward 1 resident, at least 1, 2. Oh, okay. Oh, Mr. Kenny.
Yeah. I'm Ward 1, and I'm a regular user of that venue as well. To the comments about eliminating those 2 parking spots, I think it's really a traffic safety issue as well, because it will allow somebody pulling off the street into the parking lot 1 full car length to be able to stop if somebody else is backing out of a parking spot, rather than being in the sidewalk or still partially in Easton Rd. So I think as a safety issue, those 2 parking spots being eliminated should be considered as a key element to that decision.
Thank you for your comments, Mr. Kenny. Any other comments from the public? Going back to Commissioner Stein.
I'm just wondering if in that motion we can include since it was already mentioned, the hours for the trash pickup and
Yeah.
the stipulation about the solid fencing.
Yeah. So before I make the motion with those two conditions that have already been discussed, I just want Ms. Farrell and Mr. Holman and Mr. Patel to let us know whether that could be a condition that we would add, and then I'll make an appropriate motion about the parking, I should say.
Well, I'm not sure if Len's going to speak here or not.
No, I was waiting for you, Amy. Yeah, but no,
Okay.
I mean, regarding, I'm sorry. Thought you might want, yeah, just regarding the solid fence, and definitely we have already agreed. We proposed that, we agreed to that. And as far as the hours for the trash pickup, between 7 and 9, that's certainly acceptable.
That's appreciated.
I think relative to the parking, because we haven't had a chance, as a team to kind of really take a look at that in terms of the 18 versus the 20. I certainly don't have an objection to the board. You have your full right to make whatever recommendation for condition you want. And certainly I think if you wanted to recommend that or indicate that your letter of support is contingent on 18 versus 20, I think you could absolutely do that. I can't promise that right now, so I don't want to mislead anybody. We may find that we get to the zoning hearing board and we feel like we have to make the argument as to 20. But we'll take a look at it certainly over the next couple of days here to see if we can, if we can just go to the 18 and everybody's happy, or if that creates any kind of a problem for us. But I think certainly if you qualified your recommendation the way that you're suggesting, I think you're well within your rights to do that, and it doesn't unfairly or in any unreasonable way kind of impinge on my ability to make an opposite argument if I have to.
Okay, that's fair. Thank you, Ms. Farrell. So, Mr. Diazio, would an appropriate motion be to make a motion in support of the application on the conditions relative to the trash pickup, to the fencing, and then conditioned on the applicant's agreement to reduce the parking to 18? Is that the proper motion?
Correct. And in the event that those 3 conditions cannot be agreed to, am I reading the room correctly that the fallback position would be no action?
Correct. I mean, it would just be the one condition, right? I mean, I think the applicant's already committed to the first 2.
Correct.
Yeah.
And just so I'm clear, the hours on the trash and recycling pickup are what again?
7 a.m. to 9 p.m.
Okay.
And that's the same for deliveries.
All right. So we have a motion on the floor. Any comments or questions on the motion? It's a little convoluted, but nevertheless. All right. All those in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Thank you, Ms. Farrell. Thank you, Mr. Patel. Thank you, Mr. Holman. We really appreciate it and wish you all a lot of success.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank
Good to see
you.
you as always.
Okay. That concludes zoning hearing board agenda for May 11th. Let's move on to the receipt of the monthly citizen committee meeting minutes. They are attached. The first is the Planning Commission from April 27th, 2026. Are there any comments or questions on that, the minutes from that meeting? All right, seeing none, all those in favor of acceptance of the Planning Commission's April 27th, 2026 meeting minutes say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, moving on to the Board of Historical and Architectural Review. They actually, there's nothing to do there because they had no April meeting. So I will move on to item number 3 then. Receipt of the staff reports for March 2026. We have the Planning and Zoning monthly report. Any comments or questions there? All right. Seeing none, all in favor of accepting the Planning and Zoning monthly report for March of 2026, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. The report of the building inspector for March 2026. Mr. Lynch, anything to add? No? All right. Report speaks for itself. Comments or questions there? Seeing none, all in favor of accepting the report of the building inspector, say aye.
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 Aye. And last but certainly not least, Mr. Lynch, the report of the code administrator. Comments or questions there? Anything to add, Mr. Lynch? Shaking the head. All right, then I'll move for acceptance of the report of the code administrator. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. All right, moving on to old business. There's nothing on the agenda. Is there any old business from anyone on the board? Going once, twice, closing old business. Moving on to new business. Similarly, anything from the board? New business for building and zoning. All right, we're going to close new business, and I'll open it up for citizens forum. Anything from our residents? Okay, I'll close citizens forum, and I will move for adjournment. It is 9:03 p.m. All in favor, say aye.
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 Aye.